The mill was built specifically in Sag Harbor. Lester Beebe was the owner of the mill, and he contracted a millwright, which is a specialized carpenter who designs the inside and the mechanisms of mills. And Skellinger was the millwright, and he hired a master carpenter. Pardon Tabor was his name. And those were the two men who basically were responsible for building this thing. It took 119 days to build. And when it was done, it was the tallest wooden structure in Sag Harbor. Now, if you look at it, this mill represents the absolute latest in technology for windmills. They never got any better than this mill, because shortly after wind power died down, well, actually, when steam power became more common, wind power became less common. When this mill was built, it was the height of wind power technology, and then gradually steam engines took over, and you have completely different kinds. You have ugly mills with tall smokestacks, billowing black smoke. This thing, not only is it functional, but it's truly a thing of beauty. If you look at this, I mean, it's...
And it's not going to blow up.
It's not going to blow up.
Steam-powered
It's not going to pollute your lungs. It's not going to rape the earth. It's free power.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's just a thing of beauty. It's an absolute thing of beauty. Some of the innovations of the mill. You notice it's got 8 sides, and the mill is cantered, which means it gradually tapers as it goes up. When the wind blew at the mill, it would hit the sides of the mill, but because you didn't have a big flat surface, the mill would not blow down in hurricanes or nor'easters or anything like that. So it actually, when the wind hits it, it wraps around the mill, and because it's cantered, because it gets narrow as it goes up, the wind actually goes up the sides into the sails and provides more wind for the sails as well. And this is really the great innovative feature.
And they would have put canvas on these.
Oh, yeah, there would be canvas on the sails, absolutely.
People would ask me, how could that turn?
Not all windmills had canvas. Some had wood sails.
Wood
boards, but I mean, there were sailing ships. Canvas was the natural material you would use. Now, this is really the true innovation of this type of mill. This is called a smock mill. In order for a windmill to work, it's got to face the wind. If it doesn't face the wind, the sails can't turn and the mechanism doesn't work. Now, what do you do when the wind is blowing from that direction and the sails are in that direction? Well, the mill won't work. However, that's called a fantail, or they shorten it to a fan. That little mechanism at the end there, that automatically turns the top of the mill. You see where the shingles end, and that automatically turns the whole top of the mill to face the wind. So you didn't have to do anything to it. The mill operated automatically. All you needed was wind. That they had no cure for. No wind, they had no cure for. But wind direction, that was the latest technology for turning windmills. Before that, they would actually turn the entire mill. The mills were built, well, I'll show you a picture of one inside. They actually turned the whole mill. You could either turn the mill by oxen or horses, or sometimes by human labor. You would turn the mill to face the wind, so it would work.
The Corwith mill has the tail pole.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. You push the top of it. Sometimes you push the top. Sometimes you'd actually turn.
If it was on a post.
The whole mill. They were called post mills, right? That's what they were called.
Beautiful mill.
Want to see the inside?
Yeah.
Come on. Hi, come on in. Much of the timber is original. Some of it is not. This, for instance, is original. This is not. Thankfully, the flooring is not original. We wouldn't be going upstairs if it was. Okay. We can do this. We can go up. Yeah, come on up. This is the second floor. These are the millstones. This does the business of grinding the grain. The reason why there are two sets of millstones is this one, I believe. By the way, I'm not a mill expert, so a lot of my knowledge of the mill is gained by reading and by asking questions. This probably ground the grain finer to make flour for baking. This probably ground grain a little coarser for animal feed. So you had, two different types of grinding going on. Another innovation of this type of mill, if you notice, the gearing is both wood and cast iron. That was also the latest technology. Before, wood and cast iron, the gears of the mill were all wood. See, I'm able to lift this. If that was cast iron, I would not be, particularly me, I wouldn't be able to lift it. So this is an old gear. These are the newer. That gear is probably that gear there. That's a hopper where the grain was put in. What else is there? This is the whole shaft. This is the business of the turning, of creating, well, essentially a horizontal movement, the wind, into a vertical movement, which is the shaft, and that's what the millwright was the expert at doing, of gearing the system so it would do what it's supposed to do. Horizontal wind, vertical rotation, turn the stones, and grind the meal.
Huge
Okay?
piece of wood, isn't it?
Pardon me?
It's huge.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, the weight of the stones. I mean, just to turn the stones, you need a tremendous amount of energy to rotate those stones. So, and also the weight of everything else. Don't forget, all of this is being done with wind, with basically moving air, and you're moving tremendous amounts of weight, and you really have to know how to convert that horizontal wind into a vertical rotation of the shaft in order for these things to work. Now we are going to go up to the third floor. This is still okay. If you're, if you're apprehensive about coming here,
No, I was just stopping and showing
Okay.
her the.
Window doesn't open, otherwise there's a little bit more air in here. This is where the grain was brought into the mill. This was the start of the grinding process. This is the third floor. The grain was either raised up through the interior of the mill, this way. There's another trapdoor right below this, but this is the third floor. Or sometimes it was raised from the outside through pulley systems from the outside. You see what this says? What is this? Downstairs it'll say there's a pulley shaft in here. Okay, this is obviously original. So this is where the grain would come in and would be fed into the hoppers and would be sent down to be ground. All right. Now this gets a little tricky.
There isn't much room up here, so.
There's not much room and it's kind of short. If you're at all claustrophobic, I wouldn't recommend it. But the thing I have to caution you about is you've got to watch your head. Even short people like me have to watch their heads up here, okay? So come up cautiously, and when you get up, I'll try to put you in a spot where you can stand. You have to hunch over and look at everything. So come on up. This of course, is original. I'm thinking this whole thing was probably from one tree. I'm guessing for the strength of it, it would have to be oak. This is where the sail goes out, right here. This is the sail mechanism here. The sail is out right now. It's out in the front of the building where you walked in this way. So the sail is that way. The sail would turn in the wind, turn this shaft, which would turn this wheel. It would convert horizontal movement into, by these two gears, into vertical movement. Don't forget these are cast iron gears. This would turn, and then it would turn this, and this entire shaft would turn, and that's what would turn the millstones. It was a remarkable efficient system for doing what it had to do. In addition to being a thing of beauty, it's remarkable. It was also not only utilitarian, but absolutely necessary. The early farmers had to convert their grain into something usable, flour or meal. And the only way you could do that is by grinding it. And that's what these things did. They ground the grain. This is the movable cap. Now, if you can look, that fantail is that way. If the wind should change directions, that fantail would automatically turn this entire top around. This is a plate here, a cast iron plate, and if you notice, there are three systems of wheels. There's wheels in here, there are wheels over here, and then lastly there are wheels over here. So this thing would turn. Now can you imagine the sound that must have made? I mean, it must have been almost like a symphony when this thing was in operation. And the cap would turn the sail into the wind, and that's how it would operate. You also had a small little loft up here, and I just bumped my head, with a little door there. When this mill was built in Sag Harbor, as I mentioned, it was the tallest wooden structure, it was the tallest structure in Sag Harbor. I don't know if you know anything at all about Sag Harbor, but this was built on Suffolk Street, roughly where Concord Street comes into Suffolk Street. And there's a hill there known as Sherrill's Hill, and this windmill was built on top of Sherrill's Hill. From the windmill, particularly from that loft, you could see the entire harbor of Sag Harbor. Now, by 1820, Sag Harbor had become a major whaling port. And when the whaling ships would come in, they would come in off the Atlantic, of course, and they would round Montauk Point and come down along the north part of the South Fork, and then they would make that big turn into Sag Harbor. And as soon as they made that turn into Sag Harbor, you could spot them from this windmill. And what the miller did, he would raise a flag on the mill. And when the residents of Sag Harbor saw the flag on the mill, the cry would go up, flag on the mill, ship in the bay. And everyone in town then knew that there was a whaling ship in the bay. Now, a whaling ship coming into Sag Harbor was a huge occasion. First of all, these ships went out sometimes 2, 3, later on even 4 years. So when a whaling ship came in, everyone would rush down to the harbor to see, number one, if your brother, son, husband, father was still alive, because these whaling voyages were perilous, and the attrition rate on the whaling ships was terrible, and many times they didn't survive the whaling voyages. And there was no communication sometimes. They would get on a whaling ship in Sag Harbor, you wouldn't hear anything for 2 years, 3 years from them. So when the ship came back in, you went down there to see who was still alive, or who had been maimed, or whatever. And then also, you might have an investment in that whaling ship. First you check on your loved ones, and then you check on your money to see if that ship, if you had any money invested in that particular ship. So an arrival of a whaling ship was a big happening. Flag on the mill, ship in the bay.